believe you and the media will be hearing the next several days, my trip to San Francisco, where I met with the credit rating agencies. Within the next 2 to 3 days, we will be getting some information as to our efforts there and our credit rating. So anticipate that. After the San Francisco trip, again, we went to China and started first in Shanghai, went to Beijing, and then, of course, went to the Philippines. I'm glad to be home. Yes, Glenn.
You sort of touched on the economic boom in the 80s. You mentioned the Reagan buildup and I guess the tourism industry being created here. But at that time, it was the Japanese-based tourism industry. Of course, Japan allies of the U.S. In this case, though, China not really being an ally of the U.S., how are you looking at, I guess, working two together with a military buildup that's being planned and asking for a China-Russia visa waiver program when the DoD has in the past said that there were concerns about that, security-wise?
I think you brought up a good question, and the topics of discussion in the different communities varied on where we were at. And it was obvious in Japan, we looked towards it. I met with the Minister of Defense, and it was all about, there were two parts to the Japan trip. One of them tied in to the military buildup, and looking at areas of opportunity for our people and for this island in areas that may be associated but not directly related to the military buildup, but with potentialities for growth. The second half of that trip to Japan focused on our core private sector business, which was the tourism services industry. And we looked at areas such as a gray market and areas such as a convention center. They felt it was very important to put a convention center here. Obviously in China, those are topic matters we don't talk about. This focus was on the strengths of China. They have a growing outbound tourist demographic. We want to get a piece of it. There is also so much wealth and liquidity that is forming in China that we're looking into investments that could assist us in our growth. Infrastructure, housing, technology. So there were certain areas we looked into in China. So you're right that there are certain parallels, and there's a little bit of differences between how we look at this current period in Guam's history and how it was 20, 30 years ago. But it was also an interesting time back then, too, where there were concerns, though Japan was an ally, there were concerns in the United States as it being an adversary. Remember, there were the concerns that it would take over the United States in terms of the preeminent power in the world. So obviously there are some issues as well. But we must also remember that China is one of the largest creditor nations of the United States. They trade with the United States. A lot of their markets are in the United States, and vice versa for the United States. We need a lot of their liquidity. So there is, even though there are some areas where there is competition, and intense competition, strategically around the world, for better or for worse, the United States and China are tied together. With the Philippines, boy, they have been our brothers and sisters for centuries. We were tied for centuries socially, economically, and politically. It was just over the past last half of the last century where they separated from us and became an independent nation. But we do believe that it is, again, a nation that has been tied for us for centuries, that there are so much more opportunities for mutual benefit when it comes to relations with the Philippines.
So do you think military buildup and the China-Russia visa waiver program can go hand in hand? Can they work together?
We believe it can. And by the way, there are many American governors that believe that as well. Governor Abercrombie and the NGA was steadfast in, again, their resolution in terms of finding ways to ease the visa requirements into the United States. The United States used to be the #1 tourist attraction in the world. Obviously, because of 9/11, things have changed, and it has had a negative impact on the United States and Guam when it comes to tourists coming into Guam in the United States. So there is this shared belief between the governors that we have to loosen some of these restrictions in terms of visas, in particular to the Guam-only visa waiver. We would like to see that what is afforded to Saipan and Northern Marianas be brought down here to Guam as well. I was with Governor Fitiel, and we were working together and collaboratively to see how we could work together in increasing tourist trades to the CNMI and to Guam as well. I do believe they can work parallel.
Certainly, Governor, you're right. They can coexist, and it should not be one or the other. And I don't think it's fair for the military to say, pick one or the other. We need both. We stand on both for our economy to succeed. And as recent as President Joe Biden's visit to China, he also sees the opportunities and expressed it. The federal government has established the Corporation of Travel Promotion because the United States is lagging on promoting itself in visits to the United States. And so there's a big push from the federal government to really promote travel to the United States. And one of the areas is Asia, which includes China. So we're right on. You talk about security. I mean, what about Okinawa? I mean, there's military bases there. They're letting, visitors in. Same way with Korea. They've got all kinds of visitors coming in, and we've got military bases there. So as far as security, it should not be a threat. And I think the local stakeholders or representatives here in the military have also supported the same notion that they can coexist.
If I could, Clint, on the point of clarification, the Beijing component of our trip was sponsored by the National Governors Association together with the U.S. State Department. And we were able to be entertained. The State Department, they had State Department personnel throughout that Beijing trip, interfacing with their counterparts in the Chinese federal government, and trying to get through those sort of issues that you very correctly raised. And so it was a collaborative effort between the National Governors Association. The states represented were the western states, Hawaii, the state of Washington, of course, Governor Cabo, Governor Fitiel, and we had one, Governor Bev Perdue from North Carolina, and then Governor Deal from Georgia, because they have a fairly large Chinese manufacturing investment in their respective home states. But the states and territories in our part of the world were there primarily for had a lot to do with was focused on the Chinese outbound tourist market.
But also, Clint, just one point of clarification with the visas also, the issue is the inconvenience of obtaining a visa, because there are only so few embassies that process for the whole country. So if you think from the visitor's perspective, they have to travel to that office, make their application, travel back for their appointment, which is usually a long way away, and then they pay a lot of money going back and forth. So it's really a matter of cost, inconvenience, and time, and that's really the what prevents us from getting more, because the interest is clearly there, and there are enough people. So there's two components. One is making it easier for them to obtain visas, because it is a difficult process, and it's just because the need is greater than the sources, the U.S. embassies.
In fact, we're the only country that requires a face-to-face interview when it comes to visa processing. The only country. So it's really a challenge for us here as Americans.
And by the way, my first experience with Beijing smog, I think there will be millions, and Shanghai, there will be millions and millions and millions of Chinese that want to come to Guam. And if nothing else, just to breathe our fresh air.
Very true.
Any other questions? Arvin, Crystal? No? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.